Welcome to Beyond the Blend, the podcast that goes behind the science and talks to the people at the heart of the lubricant market, telling the real story of the people who make the lubricant market move. With real insight and honest conversations, we aim to show off the people's side from across the entire lubricant supply chain. Join me, Steve Knapp, and Rob Taylor as we delve behind the scenes of the lubricant industry. Let's go. Let's start with a quick 5 from 5. Keri, structured or go with the flow?
Structured.
A PowerPoint presentation or a face-to-face meeting?
Face-to-face meeting.
Starting something from scratch or fixing something that's broken?
Starting from scratch.
A lesson learned the hard way or advice that you've never forgotten?
Oh gosh, that's a hard one. Probably a bit of both, actually. A lesson learned turns into good advice that you don't forget.
Okay. A city buzz or the countryside calm?
Depends. Probably more countryside calm.
Brilliant. There's our 5 from 5. And Keri Craig, Director of Interflon Scotland, welcome. It's
Thank
so
you.
great to have you here. We've had one or two conversations prior to today, and I'm very, very much looking forward to the conversation and sharing some of your stories. I think one of our conversations was whilst you were recently in Mexico. So we'll come you was watching your son, and we'll come on to maybe a little bit about that. But before we start and jump into this piece, just share a little bit about yourself with our listeners so they can get a bit of a view from what it's all about being Keri.
Well, who is Keri? Who am I? That's a big question. I'm Keri, as you just introduced me, Director of Interflon Scotland, which has been my role for the last almost 4 years now. Prior to that, I lived in Mexico for almost 20 years, where I worked in international education with the British Council. I consider myself probably a bit more Mexican than Scottish these days, after such a long, most of my adult life there, actually. Kids were born there, grew up there, and then we relocated back to Scotland 4 years ago, where I found myself getting involved in the family business against everything I'd kind of grown up thinking that I wouldn't do. And here I am, absolutely love it. Learn new things every day. Every day is a challenge, every day is interesting, but I think I'm finding that I'm uncovering my best self doing this role, spending a lot of time working next to my dad and getting to know my dad in ways I never knew him before, growing up as well, which is fantastic. When I'm not working, I'm usually on the sidelines of a rugby pitch or a canal or a boating place. My daughter Rose as well. So lots of fun family life going on in the background too, keeping me extremely busy.
Fantastic. So son and a daughter, both dual nationality then, I'm assuming, right?
That's correct. I think, they both were born and grew up in Mexico. We moved back to Scotland when my son was 14. My daughter was 11. I think if you ask them now, and I hope that not too many of the Mexican family will listen to this, I actually think they probably will consider themselves a bit more Scottish now. They, I think, are experiencing teenage life in Scotland, which I think is such a critical age to kind of discover your identity and your independence and really who you are. So, they've been very fortunate to experience that in Scotland.
And I think wonderful that they're probably really good people to meet, because they would have great stories, wouldn't they? They could be sharing like all these amazingly cool things that they've done in Mexico, and they'll have all their friends like listening in and really interested. I bet they're like the cool kids, right?
They are both quite cool. Yeah, they're both quite cool. I think probably some of the stories of growing up in Mexico are best not shared. They have a lot of fun things to tell, to talk about. They've been very fortunate in that we've done a lot of traveling, so they've experienced a lot of other cultures. They are cool kids to know. I like them a lot.
That's wonderful. I mean, I think, or maybe you've heard that I've got 3 kids, and we had a bit of time in Africa. and they love telling the stories. But I wonder from their age how much they really remember, or how much they remember from photographs, where yours are older and they probably have real memories, real things that they've done and real things that have shaped them and informed them.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting now. I mean, my son Elliot, he went back to Mexico for the first time this year in 4 years, and we're going back in July, and that'll be the first time my daughter's been back in 4 years. And it's interesting because obviously living in Mexico City is such a huge metropolis, and when we moved back to Scotland, they were still quite young, so they'd kind of grown up in this bubble of Mexico City. And my husband and I were both like, they don't really know Mexico City, like what it's really like. I obviously chose to live there as an adult, and I loved it, the chaos and the noise, and there's always something going on, and it's an amazing city to live in. But they only really ever experienced their little bubble of family life, their neighborhood, their school. And it's been interesting kind of going back with my son, and that he's kind of been like, it's really overwhelming. It's really loud, and there's so many people, and it's so busy. I think I prefer life in Edinburgh. It's much easier, and I guess wrestling with that a little bit in terms of saying, well, that's actually okay. So that, like, just because you grew up somewhere and that's part of who you are, it doesn't mean that's all of who you are. So it's it's okay to say I prefer being in one place to another. And I think for me as well, going back now and having lived in the calm of Edinburgh, I mean, we've got a beautiful woodland area right in front of the house. So kind of coming back this time to Edinburgh, and in the 2 weeks we'd been away, everything was back and green and had grown, and summer had really hit. And we were like, both my son and I got out of the car and we're both inhaling the fresh air and going, everything just feels so lush and fresh and full of life. And it's full of life in Mexico, but in a very different way, I guess. So it'll be interesting going back with my daughter and seeing how she finds it as well.
Yeah. And I mean, I know why you were there. And we're not ignoring your daughter's rowing achievements or interests, but share with the Beyond the Blend audience, why was you there with your son? This is fantastic.
So Elliot has really got into playing rugby since moving back to Scotland, and it's funny because he grew up in Mexico, very much not wanting to do team sports. Dad played American football, and he absolutely just did not want to do that. So moving to Scotland, he got into rugby at school and then joined a local club, Boroughmuir, one of the kind of top youth clubs in Scotland. And he's done really well, and he loves it. He's made a lot of brilliant friends through rugby, and I think has really developed his confidence. So we kind of encouraged him to reach out to Mexico Rugby. Rugby is a really growing sport in Mexico. And it was funny. I mean, this is another name drop here. My nephew dives for Mexico. He was at the Olympics in Paris, won a couple of medals last year. And there was a video online of or photos of us as a family hugging him after he just won his individual medal. And my son had on a Mexico rugby shirt, and someone in the comments was like, "Oh, I see there's like a Mexican rugby player there." And I tagged my son, and I was like, "Oh, and so it turned out she was the head coach for the female rugby team." So we encouraged him to reach out to her and sort of ask, "Well, if I wanted to get involved in rugby in Mexico, how would I do that?" So we sent lots of videos. I'm kind of always on the sideline making video clips and stuff like that. I really enjoy photography and videography. So he sent them all, and then he was invited to kind of go for some selection camps. So in May, he was participating in the training camp for the under-19s, 15s squad, who are playing Rugby America's North International Tournament in July, which we're all going to watch. And then he was also training with the under-27s team, who are training for the Pan American Junior Games, which will be taking place in Paraguay in August. So it's quite an exciting time, but it's involved quite a lot of travel.
Well, I mean, and thanks for sharing that, because I think sort of taking pride in what our kids do is such a great thing that we get to talk about, but not often share so openly. So I really do appreciate you sharing that, and the pride the pride that you clearly have as you talk about that is so cool.
Well, I think for me, it's been a real. I think coming back to Scotland, it's been really interesting, and see my son in particular develop his confidence. You know, when we moved back, he'd never written anything in English ever before. My daughter hadn't either, but she was started sort of in late primary, and as Elliot likes to remind me, has had a bit more of a head start on her English in the school. So, you know, he's done very well academically, and seeing his confidence develop as he's kind of realised he's capable of so much. And I guess it's been my husband Eric and I and other family members and you know, his coaches here. He's had a friend of a friend mentor him in rugby as well. And I guess just kind of that gentle encouragement in the background. But then as he's achieved things, you see him building this confidence and going, actually, this is possible. I am able to do this. And then, you know, feeling confident enough to take the next step as well. And I think that's what makes me really swell with pride as well. Just the seeing how he's developed in that way and has built his confidence and his identity really.
Well, we wish him great success.
Thank
and
you.
I think there'll be a bunch of listeners now looking into Mexican rugby in a different way. And let's hope that is a sport that develops more broadly.
Well, they're hoping to qualify for the 2031 Rugby World Cup in America. So who knows?
Okay. Well, let's see if they get there. And
fingers crossed.
And let's see who's playing for them. Right? There
exactly.
could be this
half Scottish, half Mexican.
Half Scottish surname Craig person on the Mexican team, which would certainly stand out, wouldn't it?
But, it would be cool.
Brilliant. Well, thanks for sharing that sort of opening and that insight into you, and really love the family connection. And of course, the family connection is one that maybe is worth sort of going a little bit more into, because you've worked in these sort of global institutions, right? You've worked in different countries, and you've already mentioned your dad, and now you work with your dad, right? So
I do.
So
what happened?
What happened? I mean, that's a jump.
It is. So I guess the story is Interflon is a Dutch lubrication technology company, and my dad, I don't think I actually really know the story of how they actually met, but my dad met the founder of Interflon back in the 90s. My dad brought Interflon to the UK, and during the 90s we spent a lot of time with Wim Horstmans and his family. His daughter and I are similar ages, so we have quite a lot of fun stories of our teenage years in holidays spent together. And I guess I grew up, my dad always worked in sales, so you know, I remember being really little and he'd come home from work and the first question we'd always ask Dad was, how many orders did you get today? And you'd know if it'd been a good day or a bad day, obviously, depending how many orders he'd had. But that was the first question we'd ask when he came in the door. And my sisters and I, you know, we had our summer jobs in the office, but in those days it was literally you were waiting for the fax to come in, and that was the job in the summer, and then packing up that order. But I really had kind of no real notion of what my dad did. And my friends at school used to always wind me up that it was Keri's dad sells lube. So you can imagine the jokes. And I just had this idea that that's absolutely what I did not want to do in life. Dad has had, for over 30 years, he's had some brilliant relationships with a lot of the pelagic fishing boats and the white fishing boats in Scotland. They've been a really core part of the business. So I had this idea, I do not want to sell lube to fishermen. That was not my kind of aspiration profession in life. So I ended up in Mexico doing teaching English and latterly moving into kind of management and particularly operations, and couldn't have got much further from selling lube to fishermen. And then just before the pandemic, my mum was very ill. She had 4 different terminal illnesses. And it was a really difficult time for my dad. He was basically full-time caring for mum as well as trying to run the business. And I just remember there was this one day where he called, we were on the phone, we were FaceTiming, and it was a Sunday. And he just sort of really didn't see himself. I was like, what's wrong? And he said, I can't cope with this anymore. I can't do it. That's it. I need to sell the business. I remember kind of hanging up the phone and my husband going to me and was like, what's wrong? I was like, I just need to go out for a walk. And he was like, I'll come with you. So we walked around. We have this beautiful park near our house in Mexico. We just walked round and round and round the park. I kind of said, well, I just feel like if Dad does that, if he sells the business, then that will be it. I don't think he'll survive longer than Mum will. This, his business is his life. And so my husband said to me, and obviously we'd been experiencing the pandemic in Mexico. We'd had a year at home. We'd had a very good year, but we'd also spent a few months living at the beach. The four of us and the two dogs in a small room with hold dolls, and we'd kind of realised, actually, this sort of simple life is quite appealing, and actually maybe we should, we realised that we could live out of the city, we could live elsewhere, and we kind of discussed maybe trying to do that. And he said, well, why don't we go to Scotland? I think we should move to Scotland and help your mum and dad. They've helped us an awful lot over the years, so maybe it's time to go and support them. And it was kind of it's kind of now or never in terms of the age the kids were at, in terms of their schooling, and that being an easy move to make. So that was kind of in March time, and we went, right, okay, we're actually going to do this. Yep, okay. So we moved in the July. Me and the kids, we moved in the July. So it was literally like, right, if we're doing this, we're doing it. My boss at the time at the British Council, she was so supportive. I came over and worked remotely in Scotland for about 6 weeks and sorted out schools and everything. And when I told her that we were moving, I think it was the first time I actually felt so valued in a job. Like, I properly felt valued. I said, I don't want to quit, but I don't want to kind of land you in it. So I need to move to Scotland to help my mum and dad. And this is kind of our time frame, but I'll leave it up to you how you want to do that. If you need me to leave, I'll leave. If you want me to stay, we can manage that. But these are kind of my conditions that I would need to do that under. And she kind of came back to me and said, well, in order to sponsor Eric's visa, like, kind of how much salary are you needing to get? And we'll work out from there kind of what hours you can do and stay on in a part-time role until I can bring in a replacement for you. And if she hadn't done that, my husband wouldn't have been able to get a visa. So that was hugely important for us, and it gave me the kind of stability and the flexibility to be able to move back here myself. And those first 6 months, I was basically settling the kids in their new schools. I was working part-time remotely with the Americas team in the British Council, and I was predominantly caring for my mum. So that enabled my dad to get back out to work, which is the thing that kind of that's his favourite thing. He likes going out, he likes seeing his customers, spending time out visiting, getting the orders. So, and then obviously managing the move for my husband. We did a big renovation project on our house as well, absolutely ridiculous. Right over the 6 months before he moved, and then he moved over in the December with the dogs, and then sadly we lost my mum in the May of 2022. She had extremely complex care needs. So once, after mum passed away, I got increasingly involved in the business. And I've come to learn there's a lot more to it than selling lube to fishermen. That's obviously a part of it. And I've spent some time up on the fishing boats up in Shetland, and they're so interesting. And I think that's what I realised. I was like, wow, actually, if maybe I'd realised this when I was younger, who knows, life would have been very different. But life takes you where it does. And I've come to realise that I love going out on site with people. I love learning how things work. find it fascinating. I mean, I am the person that also my background is not engineering, so I'm kind of, so what does this do and how does this work? But what happened? And I don't know, I guess my mind is, and what happens if this breaks, or surely this must be a problem in here. And I find that, we've got some brilliant customer relationships, and people have been so supportive of my learning journey as well. So I've been so lucky in terms of the time that people are, our customers have taken out of their days to take me on site. And I had one customer who actually walked me around the whole. It was in a newspaper printer. So he took me around the whole process. He was, do you know how a newspaper printing works? And I said, well, no, not really. And he picks up a newspaper and he like sort of manually passes it through all the machines. Says, in this one, this is what happens. There it goes and it does this. And you will have seen this on the TV. As I've been so lucky to have that kind of support in my learning, and I love problem solving. That was always part of operations, and essentially that's what I see the role of lubrication doing. It's helping people problem solve, and it's great. Every day is different. Just this week I've been in a textile mill, I've been in a maltings, in a business that does offshore kind of overhauling of kit from offshore rigs, and everything is different and every day is different, and I really enjoy that. And of course I spent a lot of time with my dad when we were growing up. He was out selling, all day. So I'm spending a lot of time with my dad. I'm not going to lie, we don't always see eye to eye, but I think it's been really great to kind of have that opportunity to spend time with him in a different way that we never had, and get to know each other in a different way, and it's great. So yeah, that's how I'm here.
Don't miss Lubricant Expo Europe from the 16th to the 18th of September at Messe Dusseldorf, Germany. With 200 exhibitors covering the entire lubricant value chain and over 4,000 visitors, including industry leaders, OEMs and end users. It's the must-attend event of the year. Register now to attend for free. Head to lubricantexpo.com/EU. Let's shape the future of lubricants together.
I mean, I can only imagine the responsibility you feel building on the legacy of your dad, because people showing you how these things work is a testament to him, really, isn't it? And all of the trust and respect that he's built over that real physical time. But I want to thank you again for sharing. And clearly it's a very sad story regarding Mum, but thank you for taking the time to put the context to why you are where you are now. And you say, things might have been differently, and of course they might have been differently, but your leadership therefore probably would have been very different, right? So you've gone from this global institution kind of structure to a close-knit family kind of operation. How do those two different experiences shape the way you lead, do you think?
Well, I mean, I think it's been a massive learning journey for me. I mean, I worked for, the best part of 15 years, like you say, in a global business with multidisciplinary teams around me in a leadership position. I managed, the marketing function, the customer service function, the academic function. So I dealt with finances and HR. I kind of did everything, but I never had to know how to do everything. So it was always knowing enough about everything to manage those teams. And I always have been of the mindset, you don't need to know how to do everything. In fact, you shouldn't know how to do everything. And I think it's obstructive when you think you can do everything. But it's important to surround yourself by people who can and who are experts in that, and you need to be able to trust them to, execute. And I did this really, I guess, professionally life-changing for me leadership course a few years back at Henley Business School. Name drop them in here. And it was a course that was really instrumental in my leadership at that time, because I'd kind of been promoted about 5 years ahead of my 10-year plan. I had terrible imposter syndrome. It was difficult, and it was really difficult. And I went on this course, and it was very much focused on your best self leadership. And there was lots of moments of, we did lots of different types of feedback. We did a kind of Myers-Briggs, we did 360, we did something called FIRO-B. And there was lots of kind of, I actually had a moment where I had to go and sit under a tree, and I was crying because I was kind of, I just didn't think that was me, but clearly it is, because this is what my 360 is saying too. But the idea of focusing on your best self, because everything I'd done up to then was kind of, you're not doing it right, you need to change and do it differently, or learn how to do it differently. And suddenly this was all flipped on its head, and it was like, actually, you're really good at some things. And what are those things that you're really good at? Like, what are you like, and who are you when you're working at your best? And what have you delivered when you're at your best? And you had to get feedback from different people from different areas of your life, and you started to see, actually, there's a theme about when I'm at my best. And it was about unlocking your best self and saying, well, actually, it's not about changing who I am or doing things differently. It's about doing more of the best of me, and actually how powerful it is when you start unlocking that. And that for me was really instrumental in my change in leadership, and kind of also thinking about how to use the best of me to get the best out of others, and develop my teams in different ways. And that was really transformational. And I guess I've gone back to basics, coming back and being in a family business. We've got a really small team. I don't think it's any secret. My dad does, he likes going out. He likes doing the selling. He's brilliant at that. And he does not really like the kind of housekeeping side of the business. And so coming back to the UK, to a very small team, and suddenly having to be the person that is responsible for marketing, and have to do the marketing, and HR, and do the HR, and not have these like subject experts to bounce things off. And then also, I guess, the challenge of not having a network here either. My whole professional life was in Mexico. So moving back, and I kind of was like, I know how to do all this stuff. I know about contracts in Mexico. I know about all this stuff, and I know how to do it in Mexico. And suddenly coming back here, I was like, oh gosh, it's like, some of these things I don't even know where to begin. I don't know what the law would say on this, and I need to learn that. And how do I do that by myself? And so I guess that's been difficult, because it's then suddenly been I guess I've been trying to work out how to lead myself in a way, as well as kind of getting the team to kind of work in different ways as well. And I think it's been a process. It's been a journey. One of, I think, the things that really helped me with that last year, I applied for a course with Scottish Enterprise, who are kind of a part of they receive Scottish Government funding, and they support kind of business growth and enterprise in Scotland. And I applied for a program called Pathways to Scale, which is developed in response to the Pathways report that was written by Anna Stewart for the Scottish Government about how female-founded and female-run businesses receive much less funding than the male equivalents, and actually how transformational it could be to the Scottish economy if that changed. So there's lots of different kind of recommendations that came out of that report, and this course was one of them. So it was actually my colleague that encouraged me to apply, and I was kind of like, I just don't think I'm the right profile. I'm not. It's not a female-founded business I'm running, for starters. And I thought, okay, well, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to apply. And I had a conversation with them, and they said, no, please do. So I joined this program. It was the first cohort, and there was a group of, I think there was 12 of us, really diverse businesses being run by women. And all of a sudden I felt I had this network. Suddenly I had this like group of people. So it wasn't necessarily my interdisciplinary teams, but it was people that were going through lots of similar challenges to me, and in a kind of similar position to me in their own businesses. So having that kind of, I guess, network to share that with, but also to feel supported by was really, really brilliant for me. And then we also received, input from experts. We had, a number of different workshops and sessions focused on different topics, where suddenly I was like, oh, right, now I know who to ask or where to go or what to do for this topic or that topic. And I think that has really helped my confidence. And then we also got a grant to spend on our business. And that kind of injection of cash was brilliant, because it was suddenly like, okay, all right, well, what do I want to do? And the kind of caveat to receiving that grant was it needs to be something that's going to accelerate your growth. So suddenly I kind of am looking at the to-do list going, right, well, what would really help here? And I had this, this injection of cash to suddenly bring in some subject matter experts on things that I knew were important for the business. But if I was just trying to do them myself, it wouldn't be done for probably another 10 years. And so I guess linking that back to leadership, it's like kind of that, it's sort of understanding that network and the support and the people that you bring around you, whether they are part of your team or they're people that you bring in, or they're just people you've connected with through networking. That has been so important for me, because I think that has then allowed me to lead in a different way or support the team in another, in a different way. And I guess realizing I can't actually do it all myself, I guess, has been
and I think
critical.
I think that really is such a powerful learning. I mean, one that you took me back into my sort of past career. When I left Shell, I was incredibly well connected across the globe, right? So every operating country, the whole of the infrastructure, I knew them, they knew me. If I was going on holiday, they would probably help me find somewhere. You're just so well connected. But then when you leave, that network is absolutely zero. So that imposter syndrome piece that you spoke about, I'd find myself going to networking meetings and talking in a language that nobody understood. And I started to think to myself, oh my God, do I really know what I thought I knew? Am I really supported? And am I really helping people? Or am I just creating confusion? So you really took me back into that thinking. And I think that's magical that you found this support network that has, clearly reestablished the North Star and given that real purpose again to your leadership, because clearly people around you will respond to that, right? And that's brilliant. So at that leadership level, I get the story, and I really resonate with it and admire what I heard. But there is the personal side, just to dig into a little bit more there, because what we've got is dad that's built this whole credible business. Relationships are strong. The fishermen love him in the Shetlands. He's still out now taking orders. In comes Keri 4 years ago, probably a new entry in terms of the relationships. Yep. And I'm assuming that trust is a pretty big commodity in this business and in this space. How have you gone about building your personal position within that business community and that customer network from a trust-based perspective?
I don't know. I guess one of my biggest personal or strongest personal values is honesty and transparency. And that's really important to me. I mean, sometimes it's in Mexico, for example, people well, I think it's also, I was reading something this morning, it was that Scottish people are so direct. So I think the kind of directness of the Scots combined with that as a personal value, I think doesn't necessarily land well in every culture, but it's really important to me. So it's always, from the word go, it's been really important for me to be really honest and transparent about my lack of knowledge, but also the fact that I'm actually really quite skilled and experienced in other areas. So actually,
absolutely,
I guess it took a bit of time to kind of to set it in my own mind in terms of saying, well, actually, I might not know so much yet about lubrication, but I know I'm good with customers, and customer experience is really important to me, as well as a kind of business value. And I know I'm good at managing projects. So actually, when you combine project management and customer experience, then that's actually what they're needing in the problem solving. And I can learn about the lubricant part, and I can ask people, and I can take training courses. Now I have my MLT1, so I know more about lubrication than some engineers that we speak to. So but that wasn't from the beginning. I didn't have that, but it was always in my mind. Actually, I know there are people I can ask, and I know I can research that, and I know I can learn it, and I'm always learning, and I'm learning more and more every day, and I'm finding it even more interesting the more I learn about it. But it was really being honest about it that was important to me, being honest about what I can do, and then using that to deliver for the customers, because that's where you get the trust from. So I guess it's been an element of both. And obviously, like you say, my dad's built these like incredible relationships over 30 years. So there's been an element of when we go to site visits together, or I guess talking about Shetland, we went to Shetland last September, and he's actually going again in a couple of weeks' time. I'm hoping to join him. And there I was very much, I'm Jim's daughter. And that was kind of my that's how I was introduced. This is my daughter. And there's huge, very deep personal relationships in Shetland. And it was really interesting because we had this amazing brand presence. Everywhere we went on the islands, it was like, oh, it's the Finn Lube man. It's Jim, it's the Interflon man. Everyone knew Interflon. Even it was really funny. The man who owned the Airbnb we were staying in came home one day. He had on an Interflon jacket, and he was like, "Is this you guys?" I was like, "Yeah, it is." He was like, "I got that from my friend on the fishing boat." So we were everywhere, and everyone knew my dad. And then there it was right that I was kind of Jim's daughter. But I think as well, I came in with a very different angle and a different kind of, a different, view on the relationships and what are you doing and why, Dad's dealt with them for 30 years. And it's, so suddenly this new person coming in asking different questions and identifying different needs. And Dad was kind of like, oh, I don't think I would have ever asked them that. So that was really great that you did. And so we realized we actually had this really quite nice kind of dynamic. My dad and I, it was a bit of a tag team. But then we go into other customers, and it's very different. And they're my customers, and I deal with them in my way, or I go in with members of the team, and I don't know. But I think under all of it is the honesty and the transparency, and that for me is just so important. And just saying yes, we can deliver, and also say, actually, something, no, we won't do that, or something. I like to go into places and say, I feel like we can add value here. And actually, if I don't see honestly where we can add value, that's okay too. Stick with what you got. That seems to be working well for you. That's fine. If that changes, let us know. So I think again that's important to me too. And going in and not trying to oversell. All those things are really important to me. I guess also I don't come from a sales background, a direct sales background. I struggled with that.
Oh, okay. Well, that's it's. We'll come on to that bit specifically, because I think what I hear, and again, I always like to think about similar journeys. I think about my business partner Rob, and I think about my time in lubricants versus his time in lubricants, right? But his skill set versus my skill set are entirely complementary. And he has things that he excels in, and I have things that I excel in. So that journey of finding where those roads meet and then how they add value to your marketplace is also fun, isn't it? So being Jim's daughter sometimes is kind of fun. But then being there independently, driving sustainability, driving innovation, driving different agendas is also fun. And I think finding that piece, I wonder when I look at Interflon Scotland, clearly there's relationships and there's trust and legacy and real solid, deep relationships. I'm like, crikey, a guy in a hotel or whatever, it's come down in a jacket. I mean, that's fantastic. And we're talking about sales now, right? Migrating into sales. How buyers buy, I can imagine is going through some journey there as well, right? So the guys on the boats, do they use social media to buy, and are we educating them, or does that face-to-face relationship and does that remain absolutely vital? So are you also battling this kind of?
Little bit. I mean, I'll tell you a funny story. So that it was actually my husband was the first person to go up to Shetland with my dad, and it was December time, so Baltic and not bit and dark, and my husband's Mexican, so it was obviously quite a draw on the island as well. This is sort of who's Jim with kind of thing. So anyway, Eric comes back and he says to me, "Keri, you've got a real problem up in Shetland." And I was like, "Well, what do you mean?" And he's like, "Well, you're never going to find someone who can sell like your dad sells up in Shetland." He said, "It's going to be just impossible." And I was like, "Well, what do you mean?" And he said, "Well," he said, "we just like kind of roamed around the islands and we'd go up to people's houses and obviously this was in Spanish, but he said the equivalent, he'd like just chap on the kitchen door, walk in, shout, 'Anybody home?' And then we'd sit down and we'd have a cup of tea and a biscuit and he'd come out with the order." And he was like, who, like, how could you possibly recruit someone that could do that? And I was like, "Well, I don't think you could." And that is obviously like, that's my dad, and that has been over 30 years of going up to Shetland. And when I went up, we went to someone's house and the husband wasn't home, Billy wasn't home, so we met him the next day in the queue for the ferry. We had coffee on the ferry that his wife had packed for us because we'd said that we'd meet in the Piddy cups, and got off the ferry and Dad's like, "Oh, are you going in the car with Billy?" So Billy and I went in the car together and talked through. He was like, "What did you get last time?" So "You got this, but this Dad told you about that." And I came out of the car and that was it. That was the conversation in the car for half an hour till we both got to where we need. I was jumping out the car to go with my dad. And so when you look at what you guys are doing with your all your kind of market insight, and you try and map that onto a place like Shetland, you kind of go, well, that just doesn't work. It doesn't. It genuinely does not work. So I think we're quite unique in that sense. And I think I read it, and I've told you this. I read a lot of what you post and your blogs, and I listen to the podcast. And I think it's so relevant and it really resonates with me. But I have this conflict of, well, how do I map that on here? And I think Scotland is very unique as well. We're a small country, and obviously there's pockets of industry and then there's huge spaces of nothing. But you go up to a place like Shetland or the Highlands or the islands, and the diversity of industry is actually quite mind-blowing. Everybody knows everybody as well. The networks are really strong. And there's this, as someone kind of coming in new to industry and engineering, the sense of actually people want to help you connect and meet people and help you out, that is really strong in Scotland. And so, we're members of the Scottish engineering community. It's a brilliant organisation. They host networking events and everything. And there's this real sense of community and helping each other out, or, "Oh, I know someone that would be able to help you with that." And so I guess where I'm going is that, I really get the marketing piece, and I think that's so important. But it's also then how you marry that with something that I actually feel is quite unique in terms of Scotland's buyer revolution, as you might call it. What does that look like? There you go. That's maybe a whole new project for you.
Yeah, maybe so. But I think it's a wonderful example, because this sort of concept of acting, sort of thinking global but acting local, right? I think it's something that's really you've really highlighted as we've been been talking, and the skills and the leadership, acting global but thinking local, you kind of done it in the business transition of your leadership. And maybe there's that wrestling with that sort of piece around what does that now look like for our customer and sales and future proofing sales. And I think it's a really exciting opportunity, because whilst we're sort of not negative on this podcast in any way, shape or form, there will be a moment even in the Shetlands where buyers will become younger. Right?
Yes.
There will be that moment. Right?
Yeah, and they are, and that's kind of, Dad and I have these conversations because, even on the fishing boats, it's maybe the sons of the owners, or there's a new skipper who's much younger, and they're also wanting to do things differently, and it's kind of saying, well, actually, how, there's this kind of legacy sale, but actually there's a real risk to that as well if we don't adapt or look at, okay, well, actually, how do they buy? If my dad was not there, how would they buy? And or a new fishing boat, how should we interact with them? If I wouldn't say it keeps me up at night, it is sort of present in my mind around how do we future proof that business that is so dependent on those personal relationships, because actually it's not really sustainable over the longer term to work in that way necessarily.
There's a solution there somewhere. Absolutely there is. But I mean, you've painted some absolutely charming pictures. I mean, I love the stories. I love the way you describe Shetland. And is this true? This is a Shetland question specifically.
Oh gosh, I don't know.
Well,
go for it.
I think you might know it better than I'm placed to know the answer. Is it true that there are no trees on Shetland?
I mean, there's maybe one or two, but no, it's very flat. It's very flat.
I can't imagine what it's like. I mean, I've seen it through that program on television. Maybe you've not seen it. There's a cop program. It's called Shetland, and
okay.
And it's filmed obviously on Shetland, and that's where I picked up there are no trees.
Yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful place, absolutely stunning. I was there kind of September times. We were quite lucky with the weather. But for example, my dad, again, he's very much old school, so up early. Kind of like, right, it's maybe time to stop for a spot of lunch, isn't it? And he's kind of, no, what are you talking about, lunch? I'm like, no, we're stopping for lunch. And then it was kind of, you get to 5 o'clock. I'm like, oh, we're not far from this beach. I'd like to go and see. Let's go. He said, I've never been down this road in the 30 years. I'm like, well, maybe it's time to go down that road. So, I was dragging him off for walks on the beach and stuff, which was a little bit out of his comfort zone.
You probably didn't need any lunch because you had so many biscuits as you were going around these people's places, right?
Biscuits and tea. That's kind of what you subsist on for a week. Not the healthiest existence.
I mean, Keri, as I said, I've really enjoyed this, and I'm sure our listeners have as well. And you've shared already some very significant learning for us all around, adapting to change and, just that sort of making things applicable and relevant, and how you've wrestled with building that network and how you've achieved that. And I think there's some amazing things for people to reflect on through this episode. So this question might feel a little unfair to ask you for another piece of advice. But for me, there's this question about if you was to give somebody a piece of advice, maybe who was mid-career change, or the biggest lesson that you would share with somebody moving into a career. Maybe it is more the female side of things than, would there be something that you would offer as a key nugget for the listeners of Beyond the Blend?
I think the power of network is really important. I think, and particularly for women in business, and particularly for women in this industry as well. It's not, I think it's fair to say that we're less represented than men. And I would also say, I have come up against, well, you shouldn't do that. You don't know enough, or you're not experienced enough, or you don't have enough technical experience. That to me is a bit like a red rag to a bull being told that.
I sense that.
Unsurprisingly. And that I think that kind of if you've made a decision to do something, I think you need to just be also really true to yourself and believe that you're capable and believe that things are possible. And just because someone says that you shouldn't, don't necessarily accept that. I think you need to find things out yourself. And I think that for me has been also a real driving force in my learning and, getting my certification and finding out more. Self-belief and surround yourself with a network of people that will boost you and reinforce that.
I love that advice. Keri, thank you so much for joining me on Beyond the Blend. People will probably be motivated and want to connect with you or follow you or get in touch. How might they best do that?
So you can find me on LinkedIn and then our website, interflon.com. You can then contact us.
Fantastic. And now the Mexican dogs are calling. So
They
we'll say goodbye, Keri. And so Keri Craig, thanks ever so much for joining us on Beyond the Blend. I've enjoyed it immensely.
Thank you very much for having me.
Don't miss Lubricant Expo Europe from the 16th to the 18th of September at Messe Dusseldorf, Germany. With 200 exhibitors covering the entire lubricant value chain and over 4,000 visitors, including industry leaders, OEMs and end users. It's the must-attend event of the year. Register now to attend for free. Head to lubricantexpo.com/EU. Let's shape the future of lubricants together.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Beyond the Blend. Be sure to follow us to catch next and future episodes as we continue to explore the people within the lubricant market.